Harry. So we're going to do cross over to N1 and then go to the phone.
Wherever that is, yeah.
Yeah, I think I've probably see it, unless it's doing like a pick back or something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just a vibe. Yeah.
Morning all, thank you. We're here to provide the latest update on severe tropical cyclone Narelle, and we want to be really clear to the community. Your windows to prepare and take action are closing, and they're closing quickly, and therefore what we're saying today is really important information. Earlier this morning, the system was upgraded to a Category 4. I can confirm moments ago it has further strengthened to a Category 5 system. This is a serious event, and we are making preparations for a Category 5 cyclone to potentially cross the coast tomorrow morning. Let me give it some context. If a Category 5 system crosses the coast in this location, it'll be the first time that's happened in over 100 years. And if a Category 5 system crosses the Queensland coast, it'll be just the fourth time that's happened in half a century. It's a serious event, a significant event, and we're asking people to take precautions and do the little things that make all the difference. Let me firstly address the crossing time. The Bureau has advised that models now point to the cyclone crossing at some stage tomorrow morning. Matt will update it from the Bureau a little more. Cyclone warning zone now extends from Cape Tribulation all the way to Lockhart River in the north down to Cape Tribulation, but also inland to the western side of the Cape. And because it's a narrow part of the state, there is the prospect that even though the system will weaken as it crosses land, it still has the potential to have some serious winds as it goes across those communities all the way across. The information we are providing today is for people right across those local government areas. You are about to experience a series of challenges, and it starts with some really significant wind. So let me go through. This system will provide the following challenges: strong wind, the potential for storm surge, heavy rainfall, and flash flooding. All four of those things are in play for a number of reasons, including the intensity of the cyclone, the already flooded catchments, and we are asking people to take precautions. I'll start with the winds, and that will be the first challenge that people experience. Winds from the cyclone will start to be felt in some areas. Areas like Lizard Island will start experiencing that from this afternoon, and closer to the coast will start experiencing it from this evening. We're talking about very dangerous, destructive winds. These are kinds of winds that don't get experienced a lot. It is a rare event, it's a large event, and we're asking people to take it seriously. The BOM will go through some specific scenarios. If you are in the warning zone, you have to make your preparations now. You have to know your plan. You have to talk to your friends and family, and you have to be prepared to execute that plan. Storm surges. Models right now are predicting the crossing most damagingly could occur on the high tide mid-morning tomorrow. That would obviously be an added complexity. A large system like this crossing on a high tide does provide the prospect of storm surges, and therefore another layer of complexity. We are obviously planning for that. Our message is, if you are in the warning zone, make sure you have your plan in place And all of the information we are putting, and that I'll be explaining shortly, is on disaster.qld.gov.au. So that's our Disaster Queensland website, disaster.qld.gov.au, and all of the local government information is also shared there. It's a single point of truth and a very, very important one. I mentioned the other challenges, rain and flooding. The rain will be significant, and heavy falls in an already saturated catchment provides challenges. That then leads to the prospect of flash flooding, river flooding, and whilst communities, particularly in this part of the state, know what those low-lying areas are, they should be preparing for that because the rain will follow the destructive winds in the hours and the days ahead. Let me turn to after the coastal crossing, as it occurs on the eastern side, what then happens. Areas inland all the way to the Western Cape should prepare to experience the kind of challenges that will come with this system. It is expected to continue to move quickly. It's moving quickly at the moment, and it will continue to do so as it crosses land. To put it in perspective, residents on the western part of the Cape are likely to experience the kind of winds that might be comparable with Cyclone Evor, which was in 1990. That was a significant event, and so those on the eastern side are preparing for a major event, but it is something that all areas in that zone should be prepared all the way until it goes into the western part of the Cape. There are challenges in this system, big challenges, but we have prepared for them, and I'm asking Queenslanders in this area to take it seriously and do the same. And this is the last window that people have, and we're asking people to respond accordingly. We've prepared for the event. We've already undertaken evacuations at Port Stewart and Lizard Island. I wanted to update you on that. In the case of Port Stewart, there were a couple of people who were still left behind who hadn't left yesterday, but they have now chosen to leave, and that's really, really good news. And in the case of Lizard Island, non-essential staff were evacuated, as I mentioned to you. There are still about 10 staff who are staying on Lizard Island. They have secure accommodation there. They've chosen to stay, and we'll obviously be supporting them as well. Places of refuge. Councils in the area have identified what has been called places of refuge. The alerts and communications are going out, including door-to-door, to talk to residents in those communities, to explain to them about those places of refuge. I'll give you an example. The community of Cowan, which is part of the Cook Shire Council, in that case, the place of refuge is the community centre. But let me unpack that. Firstly, residents will make a decision on where they believe the safest place is for them. Many people will choose for that to be their own home, and they will take the precautions that residents in this part of the state know what to do. Go to the smallest room in the home, do the little things that are right, things like making sure that you have adequate food and water in there, that you have mattresses, for example, is always a good precaution to take. People might choose, if they don't believe their home is a strong one, if they believe that it might have been built pre-1982 with the new standards, they may opt to go and stay with friends and family who have a more modern and a stronger dwelling. That's another choice they can make. Alternatively, if they don't feel they have those choices, that community centre that the council has made available is another option. But one way or another, you've got to make your decision, and you have to make that decision really shortly because the conditions will start to deteriorate later this afternoon. We've been putting significant resources on the ground, and I've been speaking to you about this not just for the last few days, but throughout what's been a really challenging year for the state. But let me give you an insight into what's happening right now in the far north of our state. 49 extra police officers are in these isolated communities. More staff are bolstering in Cairns, which will be a base for support operations. 10 people from QPS are moving into Cooktown today, again, another more far northern base. We have QPS choppers in Horn Island and in Cooktown. Police helicopters have already been moving from community to community. Police have been going door to door. You've seen the vision. That is good community policing. It's the kind of policing that shows how much people mean in a disaster event. And my message to people is, in the end, homes and items are replaceable, you're not. And that's why we're asking people to do do the little things and take the precautions, take it seriously, get through the event, and then we'll all be there to be able to get back on our feet. I can assure you of that. Swiftwater rescue crews are on the ground. All of the teams are already in place and they're ready for the crossing. I spoke to you yesterday about many of these teams have traversed from one end of the state to the other. They've been on the road for several months. On top of that, we're moving in temporary accommodation, which can house up to 180 people, and that's really important that that is there to be able to mobilise if needed as a base into the future. Trucked in, ready to go, and will be immediately put in place if required after the crossing. SES are on the ground. Now, many of these communities have an active presence already, and those local officers, their experience and their know-how is like gold. Having the extra horsepower come in from other parts of the state just bolster that local knowledge, and to see those orange uniforms in a time of disaster fills the community with confidence, and it shows that they won't be forgotten in the recovery. Marine Rescue Queensland, they're ready to deploy from Friday afternoon. They'll be using Cairns as a base. There's a couple of dozen at-risk vessels that were identified. They will be followed up post-event, so they've been put into as safer location as possible. They'll be identified immediately following that event. Turning to energy, we have 200 ergon workers on the ground. That's a significant presence. Helicopters and barges are pre-positioned in the far north. They're ready to respond, and that's to get equipment and gear there as soon as possible. We've also already pre-positioned generators to be able to help keep essential infrastructure online as best we can. But I can't sugarcoat this. The damage will be widespread with a system of that size, and that will mean reconnecting the electricity system will be a big challenge. They're up to the job, I can assure you of that. But you are dealing with remote areas, and the challenge of reconnecting electricity will be a big one, and one that will take some time. I want to turn to health. Health facilities across the far north have adequate fuel supplies. Additional paramedics have been deployed. Places like Cowan, Lockhart River, Arakoon, in Weipa. I'll give you an example of some of the operations. Some patients from Hopevale and Wudjil have already been taken to Cooktown. That's patients, for example, like dialysis patients who need to be able to get more regular service. That was identified some time ago, and that has been facilitated. An additional helicopter from Longreach has now been repositioned to Townsville, and that will be there to be used for transfers as well. Again, I want to thank those staff who have come from throughout the state, and they are there in those areas waiting to respond immediately. That tells you the kind of people who sign up to be emergency services workers in this state. To schools, there's about 780 students impacted in the area who aren't at school today. That's 8 schools that are closed as of right now. The remaining schools in the warning zone will be closed tomorrow. They will be closed, but that information will be on disaster.qld.gov.au. Turning to housing, we've got Q-Build tradies on the ground. They will be there to make sure that those essential infrastructure, things like schools, as well as some of those dwellings, can be repaired, if required, as quickly as possible. Again, thank them. Turning to roads. Roads are going to be impacted. It's very safe to say that north of Laura, getting access will be offline for an extended period of time. These communities are no stranger to isolation, but it will certainly test them. The best thing in terms of road closure, again, that single point of truth, disaster.qld.gov.au. All of the road information is there in real time, and that'll certainly help people be able to get that information. But the time to be on the roads is certainly not as the system is crossing the coast. Turning to telecommunications, we've made sure that throughout, I mentioned to you that we have a really good relationship both with the federal government through NEMA as well as the councils on our statewide disaster meeting. We also have the telcos there. As part of that, we've made sure that they've pre-deployed fuel to keep their assets operating if they remain without being damaged, so that's important. We're also playing our part. We've deployed what's called ARNIs, Air Bridge Rapid Network Infrastructure. Essentially, that goes into areas where there is black spots to try and get people the ability to connect post-disaster. And we all know how important communication and connection is. We will try to, wherever humanly possible, to keep that going. But people should be prepared to face some lengthy outages when it comes to telecommunications and electricity, because a system of this size will test those networks. There's no doubt about that. I just want to talk briefly about recovery. Firstly, we've deployed recovery teams. Jake Elwood, who many of you know, who leads the Reconstruction Authority, he's actually on the ground at the moment in Cairns waiting to go. And I know it might seem early to be talking about recovery before a system of this size has crossed, but I want communities to know that we'll be there before, during and after the event, and there can't be daylight between that. And they might be small in numbers, but it will be a big challenge for them, and they need to know that they're going to be given the resources that they need. We're working with mayors and councillors on the ground, so I'll just touch on some of them. Cooktown, which takes in Cowan, we've had a very strong presence on the ground, very strong presence. The council has been liaising with us in terms of things like the community centre and others. I have to say that the local MP for the area, David Kempton, the member for Cook, he is there in Cooktown, and he reported to me that the presence of many of the agencies I spoke about has given the community a real lift. Just to see those uniforms on the ground and the people on the ground shows this community they won't be forgotten, and I want to thank them for that. Equally, I want to thank David for being there. It's important for this community to have their elected rep at a time like this. In Weipa, 4 shipping containers of supplies have been shipped in. There is a storm surge shelter in place. We've had the Weipa Town Authority as part of our meetings. I want to thank them for their communication on the ground as well. Arakoon. Now, Arakoon is on the western side of the Cape, but there still will be significant challenges for councils, particularly Arakoon. And we're asking that community to be aware that you are in the warning zone. The system will pack a punch, and we want you to be prepared. We're also working with Pomperau and Kowanyama further to the south, because the system, and Matt will unpack some of the broader zones in the days ahead, but it is important that those communities are equally aware. And to any of the local governments, we will continue to work with them as the system transitions from wind to potential for storm surge, rain and flooding. So finally, I know these communities are resilient, and they've been here before, and they know what wind and a lot of rain looks like. This is a serious system though, and I'm asking people to take it seriously, because it is the kind of event that doesn't happen all that often. So to put it in perspective, not since the late 1800s, in the far north of this state, around Cowan, has a Category 5 system crossed. And at this stage, that is where the system is. Category 5 systems don't cross the coast that frequently. 4 times in half a century in Queensland, in what is a state that's no stranger to disasters. So it's a serious event. But I assure you we can get through it if communities take it seriously, if they look out for each other, if they prepare well now, if they heed advice. We'll get through it. And throughout this, I hope that people have seen a couple of things. When we get information, we share it. We've only just found out about the system being upgraded to a Category 5. We're giving the information in real time. I trust Queenslanders to make the right decision. I always do. If you give people information, people are good and they do the right thing. And I'm just asking them to look out for their neighbours and to have a plan in place, take the event seriously, because it is a serious system. And if they do, I have every faith that we'll get through it. And then we move on to a fulsome recovery. I'll might ask Matt to join us.
Thanks, Premier. So as the Premier said, severe Tropical Cyclone Narelle has intensified to a Category 5 system, with wind gusts in excess of 250 kilometres per hour near the core of that system. Now, the cyclone is in the northern Coral Sea, around 300 kilometres to the northeast of Cooktown, and around 500 kilometres directly east of Cowan. It's moving west-southwest at around 25 kilometres per hour towards the coast. It is expected to move to the north of Cape Melville early Friday morning, and then cross the coast during Friday morning. There is a tropical cyclone warning zone for impacts within 24 hours that stretches from Lockhart River down the coast, the east coast, to Cape Tribulation. And the watch zone, and that is for impacts within 48 hours, then extends across Cape York and it stretches from Weipa down to just north of Kawanyama. So all those areas over the interior, as well as extending over to the west coast, are within that watch area. Beyond that, the system will continue to move to the west, across the Gulf and towards the top end of the Northern Territory. But the system will move very quickly across the Cape during Friday. So by Friday evening, it'll cross the western coast near Arakoon, and then, as I said, continue to move further west into the Gulf. Now, I'll work through a few of the impacts. Firstly, the winds. So we're expecting damaging wind gusts. So that's up to 120 kilometres per hour between Lockhart River in the north and Cooktown in the south. And that's from Thursday evening and then extending across the Cape as we get into Friday. Destructive winds up to 160 kilometres per hour are likely from Lockhart River down to Cape Flattery from later Thursday evening, and then obviously increasing as the system approaches the coast. Now, very destructive wind gusts in excess of 250 kilometres per hour are expected near the core of the system, so within the eye wall of this severe tropical cyclone as it crosses the coast on Friday morning. And as I said, looking like it'll move just to the north of Cape Melville and then cross the coast nearly directly east of Cowan. But this is a fast-moving system, and those warnings will be updated as the system continues to move towards the coast. The second significant impact is heavy to intense rainfall, with 3-day rainfalls through Thursday, Friday and Saturday in excess of 200 millimetres, stretching right along the coast from Townsville up to Lockhart River, with totals in excess of 500 millimetres expected to the north of Cooktown up to Lockhart River again. And those totals will extend across the Cape York Peninsula, including areas like Cowan, Weipa, Arakoon and Kawanyama as this system continues west. At the moment, we're seeing relatively normal tides, but as the system approaches the coast between Cowan and Cape Tribulation, we are expecting tides to reach near the normal highest astronomical tide in those areas, and for areas close to the system immediately to the south. So that's that Princess Charlotte Bay area, just from Cape Melville stretching around to the coast off of Cowan. There is the potential for a significant storm surge in those areas, so very dangerous coastal inundation with large waves to go with that. So serious impacts in that respect. And we do have flood watches current for all of the Cape rivers and creeks to do with that intense rainfall. I'll quickly mention that there are major flood warnings continuing further west and to the south for places like the Thompson, the Cooper, Georgina and Eyre Creeks, as well as the Ballon and Flinders rivers. So we are still seeing major flooding in those rivers. For the majority, they will not be impacted by this rainfall, but there will be some increased rainfall around the Gulf, the southern Gulf areas, but nothing too out of the ordinary for this time of year. So in summary, severe tropical cyclone Narelle is already a Category 5 system and moving west and expected to cross the coast with wind gusts in excess of 250 kilometres per hour near the core. And that crossing is expected early Friday morning directly to the east of Cowan. And we do have damaging and destructive winds extending right from Lockhart River down to Cape Flattery in the south. Heavy to intense rainfall in excess of 500 millimetres is possible, stretching from Thursday through to Friday, Saturday, and that stretches across the Cape. And as I mentioned, we are expecting the chance of a significant storm surge with this system as it moves through. In terms of the impacts and what it feels like to go through a Category 5 system like this, I'd remind folks that we have shared through our socials and other sites a video that explains different categories and what it really means, a sort of immersive way of trying to get the message across about what a Category 3, 4 and even 5 like this system means as it crosses the coast. And as always, please stay up to date with the latest warnings. These warnings will be reissued and updated as the system approaches the coast and then crosses the Cape. And all those warnings are both on the Queensland disaster pages as well as the Bureau's website and our app. Thanks.
Matt, can you please clarify what's meant by the astronomical high tide and
Sure.
how that relates to this storm surge and the cyclone?
Yeah, so tides through the year vary. The highest tide might be 2 metres on a given day, and then 3 months later it might be 2.5. That's the high, so let's say 2.5 is the highest tide for the whole year. That is the highest astronomical tide for somewhere like Cape Melville. In this circumstance, we're expecting the tide to get to that highest level that people might have seen before. The cyclone adds storm surge on top of that. So we always talk about levels above the normal highest tide that they might see with the king tides, which are normal astronomical tides.
Thank you, Chris Stream, the State Disaster Coordinator, Queensland Police Service. I cannot overstate that a lack of preparation could result in a serious series of consequences for yourself, your family and your community, or even fatal. You've just heard Matt and the Premier outline the expected winds and rain activity. In particular, the type of wind that is being predicted is the sort of thing that will blow apart sheds, that will blow caravans down roadways and create fields of airborne debris. And I talked yesterday about those wind speeds. So those types of objects being propelled at over 100 kilometres an hour will have a fatal outcome. So again, you have a closing window of opportunity in regards to your emergency kits and your own emergency plans. Do not forget that in the circumstance where we have a cyclone passing over, that if you phone 000 during a cyclone, it is likely we will not be able to get to you emergency responders, and that includes medical response, because it is unsafe to place those emergency responders out into those types of weather situations. As a government and in support of the government, we are attempting to do everything we can to help the community, but it's the individual, those family and community actions now, which will also have significant outcomes and outcomes for the safety of that broader community. As I said, we are putting extra resources into the community, police, fire, ambulance, medical support as well. But again, I can't overstate the individual efforts that could have some pretty serious outcomes if they do not pay attention to that. Post-event, now we are likely to see, as the Premier also mentioned, we are likely to see down power lines and damage to infrastructure. Again, we will not be committing utility repairers and other responders to those repair activities until we can ensure that it is safe to do so. So immediately after, and in some cases during the eye, when things can calm down, we will still see down power lines, risks of falling trees and that sort of activity. So it will take some time for the utilities to utility responders and the emergency service responders to work into those communities and start to create safe areas and zones, as well as I talked yesterday again about our inability to fly aircraft in those high winds. So there will be a gap in response in terms of the cyclone activity as it moves across the Cape. So I cannot, again, overstate the types of activities that people conduct now can have good outcomes. There's lots of evidence to suggest where people do their planning, take those precautionary measures now, that we won't see a loss of life. And as the Premier mentioned, the value of life obviously far exceeds any damage to infrastructure or even to your own home and that type of thing. Thank you.
Everyone will take any questions on the weather event and then we can address National Cabinet once we've done that.
Can you just clarify with resourcing? Most of the state's resources have been deployed to that region currently in the Cooktown area in preparation of response.
Good question, Lawrence. Not just in Cooktown. We've got resources in the communities themselves as well, in places like Wujal, in places like Cowan. And it takes a pretty special Queenslander to do that, I can tell you.
Can you give us an idea of how many people are in the watch zone who are going to be affected?
Yeah, I might get Matt to unpack the changes in that, but just to give you a rough indication. So in the case of Cohen, there's a few hundred people there in Cohen, and that's going to be that at this stage it's exactly where the system looks like it's tracking. But it's a broad area. You've got a few thousand people who call Cooktown home, and many of the Indigenous communities have got significant populations as well. Several hundred, 500 or 600 in places like Wudjil. So it's significant. It's significant, and just because it's smaller in numbers than what we normally see if it goes over one of the larger regional cities, it doesn't make the preparation any less serious or the recovery any more of a challenge or less important. And we are taking this really seriously, I can tell you.
When does the danger from the cyclone itself pass? Obviously, we've talked about the down power lines and rest of that, but when can people basically go outside?
Might be one for you, Matt.
So in terms of the watch zone, so I mentioned that the watch zone extends all the way down from Lockhart River to Cape Trib, but then across the Western Cape from just north of Kawanyama up to Weipa, right? So that's that watch and warning zone total for impacts within 24 hours on the eastern coast. So when I say impacts, that means winds getting above that damaging threshold of 120 kilometre-hour gust. And then as we get closer to the core system, that 160 kilometre-hour destructive winds. So that's and then the actual core, the eye wall of the system. So that you're talking tens of kilometres for that eye wall, whereas we're talking hundreds of kilometres of the coast for those destructive and damaging winds, and then extending west across the Cape. And I should have mentioned that this system looks like it will maintain a sort of Category 2, Category 3 strength as it crosses the peninsula and then re-intensify as it moves out to the west of Arakoon. So to put that in perspective, as it grows across the top of Cohen, we are expecting potential for sort of those destructive winds in that area, even though Cohen is around 50 kilometres inland from the coast.
Just on the track map, yesterday there was high probability that the track map would stay the same, that it's not going to duck further south or north. Is that still the case?
It is. This system has been remarkably consistent, and there's usually a fairly large spread, and obviously as you get closer to the event, that spread tends to narrow down. For this one, it has been pretty well modelled, and it is consistently moving almost west or directly west-southwest. And that has been consistent for a few days. Look, as the systems approach the coast, so as they get really close to the coast, there are coastal interactions which tend to wobble the system around a bit and also change the intensity in the last hours as it approaches the coast because of those complex interactions with the land, the shape of the coast, etc. So we will expect to see some sort of movement in that pattern, and that's why I emphasised that we should stay up to date with those warnings, particularly as we go into the early hours of tomorrow morning.
Do you know around about time yet? You say Friday morning.
Sure.
Very early Friday morning? Or?
The track map has it going across the coast directly east of Cohen at around 10 a.m. But as I said, the system is moving very quickly at the moment. If it continues to move that quickly, then it may be slightly earlier than that. If it does wobble around as it gets to the coast, as we've seen with other tropical cyclones, it may be slightly later. So the key area is during Friday morning, but the most likely at this stage is around 10 a.m.
Is it likely to cross as a Category 5? We saw yesterday, sometimes you said it was Category 4, sometimes Category 5. Is it going to hit current Cat 5 or Cat 4 at this stage?
The fact that the current satellite imagery and the current analysis has it as a Category 5 system increases the probability of it remaining as a Category 5 system as it crosses the coast. Now, again, I talked about intensity changes as the system crosses, but the messaging is that there's the potential, and it's most likely that it will cross as a Category 5 system at this stage, right? So that is a very unusual system, as the Premier mentioned. For this part of the world, you have to go back a long way to find another system that moves through Cape Charlotte Bay and across Cohen. But yeah, certainly, very intense system, and we are expecting it to cross as a Category 5.
How big is going to get that eye wall, those extremely heavy winds you were talking about, the eye wall, that's going to fairly well direct hit Cohen, is it?
At this stage, the track takes it very close to Cohen, so the eye would be a probability or possibility, I should say, to impact Cohen. But it is too early to say that that 10-kilometre or thereabouts eye wall will actually cross Cohen, right? So let's just watch the system very closely and update those warnings as we get closer.
How big is the system, like the width or the size of it?
Yeah, it is a very intense system, but by comparisons, it is actually slightly smaller than average, right? So some systems might be 500 or more kilometres across. This one's more in the realms of hundreds of kilometres across, but not as extensive. And that does impact how extensive the eye wall is and how extensive the really heavy rain and destructive winds are.
You talked about the system re-intensifying once it goes offshore. So is the danger past once it's crossed over Queensland? Is there a danger that it could come back or anything like that?
Now, again, the modelling is pretty consistent, that the system continues to move west and actually moves quite quickly across the Gulf towards Groote Island and the top end. It doesn't mean the danger is completely over. There will still be tropical rainfall. There will still be very windy conditions, but it's that destructive and damaging winds that we're most concerned about. And by the time we get into Friday evening and Saturday, they should have passed and be moving further west as the system moves that way.
How many people are going to get affected by this system?
I don't know the exact population of those areas. I know that the coastal areas along there are pretty sparsely populated. Cohen's probably the biggest population centre, but Lockhart River and other places. So I don't know the exact population.
Thank you.
Just on evacuations, you mentioned Lizard Island again and Port Stewart.
Yeah.
Have you evacuated any other evacuations, I guess, occurred?
There's been, police have gone door to door and have spoken to individuals, and some people have chosen to evacuate themselves. There are, Cooktown was good enough to open up their centre, so if people didn't have anywhere they could go there. That window has closed. The last thing we want is people on the roads into the afternoon. But people still have time to make their individual plan, and that individual plan can make sure you've got a strong room in the home and that you've got all the resources that you need. It might be staying with a friend or family who've got a newer, stronger dwelling. It might be going to those places of refuge that the councils in the local area have put up. But just know your plan, execute it now, don't wait until tonight.
Are you confident that all isolated communities have been reached with those warnings in time?
Yeah, they've done a good job, I have to say, because the reason why the question is very relevant is you're dealing with an area that is very remote, and getting information and messages out can be challenging at times, which is why we've not just relied on the good nature of you guys and to do it, but also the police going door to door. We've given every opportunity to show people that this system is significant and they should take it seriously. Now, there'll always be an element of people who second-guess warnings. That's human nature. I'm just saying that all of the information points towards this being a really large system and potentially very serious system. And we're giving that information through every means possible. And to have police and emergency services and the councils going door to door is really important. That's happening right now in Cohen. Right now in Cohen, we've got emergency services and the councils again going around. As I said, a number of people did leave. A number of people did leave town yesterday, but for those who have stayed, just double checking that they've got their plan in place.
Do all vulnerable communities have enough supplies to be self-sufficient if they're cut off?
We will make sure that they have supplies. Our focus right now is to say to people, use this last remaining hours to do the little things around your house, which are important. Make sure that you've got adequate water. Make sure that you've got your food ready to go. Make sure that you've chosen the best place in your home and the safest place to be, and ride the system out. And if it's not your home, it might be friends and family who've got a newer home. If that's not available, it might be one of those community centres. But take the time now. If you're watching this now and you think you haven't quite thought that it might be this serious, it is. So do the right thing now. And once that happens, once we get through that system, then if there are challenges individually about getting medicine and food and resources, of course we can make that work. That's a secondary issue. The main issue is just getting people through the system and making sure that people stay safe.
Is there any update on the ADF? Do they remain active?
Again, we had the representative from the Australian Defence Force at the meeting this morning. We had the Federal Minister. We had the NEMA there as well. And ADF have their assets and their resources waiting, and if they're required, they will be used.
Councillor, what's Cohen's evacuation centre look like? Is it fixed for supplies? Is it for
Yeah, it's a community centre, so it's run by a local community group. They've been good enough to open it up. Council is working with them to make sure that there's adequate food and water there, but people will also be encouraged to bring some of their own things, but they'll be told that as people are going door to door. But that may not be an option that people want to exercise. Normally, people want to stay in their own home, and if they're concerned about their home, the next best option is often with other loved ones. That's a real sense of safety and presence. So that's the other option. The community centre options, they're normally the last resort for somebody, but it's just another option for them. As I said, we've been getting the warnings out for the last couple of days. Many people have chosen to leave Cowan itself. We were involved in the evacuations in other places. In the case of Cowan, people, a large community, people have chosen to either self-evacuate or they've made preparations, and if they haven't, we want them to do that now.
Should people be expecting to lose power, given how destructive the
There's no doubt that essential services will be impacted, and loss of electricity and potentially loss of phone service for an extended period of time is a real prospect. Winds this size don't happen every day. It's a significant event and there will be significant challenges. But first and foremost, look after yourself. We'll then help get people through. And the work of Ergon and others in pre-positioning generators to try and keep some of those essential services up online. There's a couple of hundred crew who are ready to go to try wherever possible to reconnect power as quickly as possible. We've been speaking regularly to the telcos, and that includes the likes of Telstra and NBN and Optus and others, about making sure that they've got adequate fuel for their generators in place. So we've done the hard yards, but it's going to be a big system, and it is really going to test individuals, and it'll test our response. But I've got every faith that people can get through it, but I do want people to understand it's serious, and I am saying to people to understand that this is a fair income big event, and I want people to take it seriously.
You mentioned yesterday, Premier, that there were conversations between councils and the mayors about fuel
Yeah.
sharing. Has that occurred at all?
No, it hasn't had to, but the fact that that conversation is being had shows great will, but it also shows great frustration. We really want communities to be thinking about other elements of the recovery, not about whether or not they can get access to essential services.
Is there enough fuel in the area, though, for that event?
Yeah, the Cookshire alone has got significant resources, and they confirmed that again today. But we'll be doing everything we can to help people with whatever resources that is, and that might be fuel, it might be medicine. There's going to be challenges getting around. Many of the roads will be offline for some time. That's not unusual for far north Queensland. Remote locations, they're often isolated for extended period of time. There's shires that have been out for over a month since Christmas in large parts of Queensland. And just remember, in the southwest of the state, we've still got communities that are well and truly isolated. A place like Junda, you still got major challenges in the southwest of the state. So regional Queenslanders deal with isolation. But in terms of those essential services, we'll move heaven and earth to get them in there. But there will be significant disruption, and things like power, a system this size will test the network in a really big way, which is why generators have been pre-positioned. But we also do need people to understand, first and foremost, they have to get through this event, keep themselves safe, and then we move into the recovery quickly. Anything else?
Another system behind Narelle, I think it's like 35U. Are
Yeah.
you worried about that system at all?
Over to you, Matt.
I'm tempted to say, can we get through this one? But yes, we are concerned and watching the modelling on that one. As is often the case, when you're talking 7 to 10 days out, there is a vast spread in the outcomes that the predictive models are producing, and that is the case for this system. But it's the best advice we can give is there's still potential for tropical low development and potential cyclone development in the Coral Sea, so off the Queensland coast there. And we'll just have to watch that one closely. And the Bureau's 7-day tropical cyclone outlook paints those risk areas, right? So it goes out to 7 days, and you can step through time and see how that risk area moves and what the chances are. There might be 10% increasing to 30 or whatever percent as you go through time. But at this stage, it's very low probability, but there is a concerning area continuing in the Coral Sea.
All right, we might move on to the next one. Thanks, Chris. Thanks very much. All right, we're all good to go again? Thank you. Well, everyone, early this morning here from Kedron, I attended a meeting of National Cabinet chaired by the Prime Minister. Thank him for the invitation. And it was to discuss the Commonwealth Government's fuel shortages and what we can feed back and help in any way to deal with that. For our part, we did a couple of things, including conveying the importance and some of the frustration. And in the last few days, I've spoken to a number of Queenslanders as well as some of our MPs. And there is obviously real concern for access and affordability. And in the case of those who are in either primary production, so things like horticulture or fishing and the mining industry, there's real concern, and they want to know that there is a plan, short, medium and long term, to be able to get access, and we conveyed that, and equally the importance of making sure that people can afford the fuel in the first place. And I think about the pressures that everyday people are under, filling up their car, whether they're in a city or a regional area. That is a challenge. If you can get the fuel, the cost is obviously a challenge as well. Our request on behalf of Queensland is very clear. We want two things to flow: information and fuel. And if the government can work on those plans and show the clarity of messaging, people will respond and respond accordingly. That's what we've been calling for some time. I've asked David, who is Energy Minister as well as Treasurer, to join me today, and he can sort of give you an update of what he's been doing. But we just want this to be on the agenda, and for there to be no stone left unturned when it comes to making sure that that two-way trade and that clear communication is done. You'd be aware by now the Prime Minister's appointed a national coordinator, and each of the states have been asked to be given to provide a contact for the federal government to deal with what they're calling the task force coordinator for fuel supply. As a result of this, I've asked well-respected public servant Bob G to be that link with the Commonwealth. Many of you know Bob, and I've asked Bob to do that job for a couple of reasons. One is he's someone who's proven to handle himself well in critical events like disasters. But secondly, he is our cross-border commissioner. And because this is an issue of a national scale, having someone who deals with complications like that on a day-to-day basis puts him in the right stead and gives him the right skill set to be able to feed that information back into the Commonwealth. And I made the point that we will well and truly sign on to provide any assistance to come up with a national solution to what is a national crisis. We raised this issue a fortnight ago, and I addressed this yesterday, but I'll say it again. In my discussions with the Prime Minister, I do believe he's taken this seriously, and today's meeting was done in that spirit. I'm not convinced we had the same engagement early from the Federal Energy Minister, and David can go through a little bit more of that, but we raised it on behalf of Queenslanders who were deeply concerned about affordability and access, and instead of a response and a solution, we got a question time lecture. And that does no one any good. We'll always raise things on behalf of Queensland, and I'm glad we did. We moved first, in fact, and I think the work of the Deputy Premier as well as the Treasurer and Minister for Energy is excellent. So we welcome the response from the Commonwealth. We stand ready to provide the feedback to that coordinator. I think it's a great step in the right direction, and we'll play our part, I can assure you. And finally, I just want to give an insight into why it's important. Queensland is the most decentralised state in the country, and that means that having access to fuel is more important here than anywhere else in the country. That's why we raised it strongly, swiftly, and that's why we haven't taken a backward step on it. And we certainly acknowledge that whilst it is a national crisis and it does involve a national plan and national solutions, we will feed into that, and we will do it, we'll throw everything at it to make sure that we can give people the certainty that they need for that fuel to be able to flow in an affordable way, but also in a consistent way. Thanks for your efforts, David. Over to you.
Thank you, Premier. 2 weeks ago, I wrote to the ACCC warning of potential price gouging at the very beginning of the Middle East conflict, because we had already identified a number of concerns that were popping up around rural and regional Queensland. Last week, I and a number of my ministerial colleagues met with agricultural leaders, the ag forces, QFFs, cane growers, to learn more about what their members were saying, what they were hearing in relation to fuel supply and distribution right throughout rural and regional Queensland. There has been a constant flow of information and conversations between me and CEOs of fuel companies, suppliers, independents, distributors, and most importantly customers, consumers, agricultural sector in particular, and rural and regional Queensland, that have been living through the supply chain blockages. And of course, last week we wrote to the Federal Energy Minister, Chris Bowen, warning that we're on the precipice of a major challenge here in Queensland, and particularly in rural and regional Queensland, and we were ridiculed. And it took to the end of last week for the Federal Energy Minister to finally take these matters seriously. So today, we welcome the response from the federal government, but this is just the start of a very long road ahead. I think, as the Premier has mentioned, Bob G will be our contact here in Queensland for the national coordination effort, and Bob will be taking briefings this afternoon and liaising as the contact here in Queensland with that national coordination effort. I want to make clear that we will work constructively with the federal government to assist them deliver fuel and information to where it is needed most. That is what we will be doing to assist the federal government in their efforts, and Bob will start that work immediately. Next step from here, the Federal Energy Minister has convened an Energy Ministers subset meeting of the Energy and Climate Change Ministerial Council, which will occur tomorrow afternoon, where I'm looking forward to hearing the next stage of the federal government's response to this challenge, and we will again contribute constructively to it. Any questions for me first?
What do you think of the ACCC announcing this investigation into anti-competitive behaviour from the retailers in the bush? Should they be looking closer to Queensland?
They should be, and that's why as soon as this happened and we were identified there were some serious concerns 2 weeks ago, I wrote to the ACCC raising concerns that there was price gouging underway, and the ACCC now has that responsibility. It's appropriate that they undertake those reviews, and I'm looking forward to them closely examining the behaviours out there to make sure that the increase in supply is seeing as much downward pressure on fuel prices as possible. That's the ACCC's challenge, and the federal government must back them in with the appropriate resourcing and, if necessary, legislative powers to make that happen.
Treasurer, there's a fuel czar, there's a Queensland contact. It sounds like a lot of bureaucracy. What's the tangible impact of today's announcement for a farmer in Gundawindi, for example?
Well, what's most important right now is the federal government has provided early response, a response now to this challenge where we belled the cat early, and they have now given the first stage of that response, and we're looking forward to seeing more of it because it's a very long road ahead. Let's be clear. There has been 2 weeks where we have been calling for action. We've written to the ACCC, we've written to the Federal Energy Minister, and they had failed to act to a plan, whether it be a short, medium or long-term plan. We're still needing to see more of the medium and long-term plan now, but this response, we look forward to hearing more of it tomorrow at the ECMC meeting. But most importantly now, in respect directly to a producer in Gundawindi, we stand ready to assist the federal government in the delivery of fuel and information to where it's needed most. And Bob G, as our contact point here in Queensland, will assist the federal government in delivery of that.
What about the question, Premier?
One more?
The cross-border.
Yes, he is.
Yes.
So what actual role does he have aside from being contacted by the federal government?
Well, he'll be taking briefings this afternoon. He's got a role to undertake there to make sure Queensland's playing its part in the distribution of fuel and information. He'll be taking briefings this afternoon. There'll be further details to be undertaken at the ECMC meeting tomorrow, and I look forward to hearing more of that information from the Federal Energy Minister at that time. But Queensland will assist the federal government in the distribution of that information and fuel, and we'll play our part.
Premier, are you confident that the decision made today will lead to lower prices at the bowser for Queensland at some time soon?
Well, the federal government has to show that the decision taken today will mean more fuel will come to the country, more certainty will spread across it, and therefore will improve access and pricing. That's why we put our hand up to say any request of us, we stand ready. And sort of pick up on Andrew's question from before, we got asked this morning to provide a contact, and I gave them someone who is beyond reproach, for someone who's well respected, well connected, and understands the bureaucracy with dealing with cross-border issues. I couldn't think of anyone better, which is why we put Bob's name forward. This is a national issue. It's a national crisis, and that was a pretty clear view from the chief ministers and premiers. But in the end, they're all our people, they're all Australians, and we want to play our role to help. We just want the federal government to, now that it's been acknowledged that it's a big issue, to show the sort of two-way trade that will ensure that there is adequate fuel supply. And until you get adequate fuel supply, you won't get the presence of bowsers being filled in regional Queensland. You won't get people in agriculture and mining to be confident, and you won't get downward pressure on prices, which is why we do see this as the first step, but the first step of many that's needed.
Premier, yesterday you said that it's high time the federal government had a short-term, medium and long-term plan.
Yeah.
This meeting, did it go much further than announce a task force?
Well, I think it is the short-term plan, Harry. I think I try to see things objectively. I think the fact that everyone's been called and the federal government has put this issue on the agenda, and they've put a single point of contact federally, and they've asked us to provide information from every corner of the state from somebody senior. I think that is the first step, and I'll acknowledge that. It's not so long ago we were being told that this wasn't an issue from a federal minister. So today is a pretty big acknowledgement. So that's step number one. And now what the federal government needs to do is, by having a dedicated person there and by showing that this is a national issue, they now then have to start getting information to flow to say these are the steps we've taken to shore up the continuity of supply. And that will give people the confidence that they don't have at the moment.
The state opposition was critical yesterday of the state government's response to this fuel issue, saying that other states had stepped up and taken action before the federal government had organised this meeting. Why didn't the state government make any decision there?
We were literally the first state. We were literally
policy-wise, though, Premier.
But we were literally the first state to put this on the agenda. Probably I might just leave that one there.
I think what G as opposed to the DG of energy.
Yeah.
Energy.
It's a fair question, but I just think Bob is someone who's just so well respected, and he's dealing with issues that are of a cross-border jurisdiction already. He's somebody who I've seen in disasters. I do think he's someone who's really well respected as well. So I just think having someone who can bring that skill and the gravitas to the position, I hope shows Canberra that we're fair dinkum about it, and now we want to see them translate this first step, which is a small step, but a step, into that medium and long-term plan. And that's what Australians want to see.
Is having a fuel supply coordinator going to work at this point, or is it too little too late?
Sorry, Claire, say that again?
Is having a fuel supply coordinator going to work at this point?
It certainly has to be a step forward. It's not a retrograde step, that's for sure. So at least it's something. And a big part of this will be making sure that there's somebody there who can get information. And so it's a single point of contact for us to be able to continue to raise issues and show where there is great uncertainty. And I come back to a conversation I had with a grower in Stanthorpe who was genuinely and genuinely still remains concerned about whether or not they will be able to put adequate fuel in their tank to be able to harvest their crop. And to put that in perspective, that's not something that oh, well, they'll go back in a couple of weeks' time. It doesn't work like that in agriculture. They've got one window, and if they don't nail it, they've missed out on that entire crop. All of the blood, sweat and tears, all of the expenses are there, and you just don't get the harvest and you don't get the payday. And that means that the people who also have the jobs on the farm are impacted, the small businesses in town and the people who work for them are impacted. So it's a really big deal. And if you don't have continuity of fuel supply, that'll pass through right across the board. There'll be people in hospitality in the next couple of days who will also be getting notices that their goods and services are going up because the cost to bring them to them will be impacted. You'll get that in your fruit and vegetables, and that has an inflationary pressure point for every single Australian. That's why we've said it is such a serious issue, and I see today as one small step forward with a long way to go.
Jim Chalmers today released some Treasury modelling which shows in one scenario we could see these high fuel prices for 3 years.
Yeah.
How quickly do you want to see this medium to long term plan come to fruition?
I'll get David to talk about the modelling. He was only just discussing it.
So with respect to the second part of the question, first, Michaela, so there's no doubt there's not a treasurer anywhere that isn't concerned about events in the Middle East. And we know that the longer it goes, the greater the challenges for economies. Global supply chains, higher prices that flow not just to fuel but right throughout the economy. So the modelling that the Federal Treasurer has released, treasuries across the country will be undertaking work, particularly as all the states and territories move into budget season, where we'll be no different there. We'll undertake that work, we'll do the work that's necessary. But the modelling that is on foot with the Federal Treasurer, there is no doubt that the longer the conflict goes on, the greater the inflationary pressures, higher prices, not just at fuel level, but right throughout the supply chain, that flow right through the economy.
And then I must go, guys. We've got another meeting this afternoon.
The Education Minister this morning says that your office was aware that a name had been chosen for the Glasshouse Theatre prior to the public consultation. Why did you keep that hidden from Queenslanders?
But the Minister's explained what happened there, and I spoke to you about it the other day. So he identified a name, he sought consultation, and people backed the name. And I just haven't had any pushback from people about it. I genuinely haven't. People see it as a world class asset, and it's named something that enables us to be able to market it to the globe.
But why not reveal that to Queenslanders before launching the consultation?
But I think he did. I think he was pretty. I think he's unpacked what he did. Well, he took people's temperature, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much.